Kauai. They call it the Garden Island. And if you have ever seen it, even in a photograph, you understand why. The cliffs, the waterfalls, the color of the water in the afternoon light. There is no place on this earth that looks quite like it. People save for years to come here. They cross oceans, they count down the days. They come here to feel safe. But in the year 2000, something was moving through the west side of this island. Something patient. Something that had already been to prison once and had come back. Something that looked ordinary enough to walk up to a woman in her own yard in the middle of the day and introduce itself by name. Two women never went home. One survived by crawling across the ground for 3 hours with a broken arm and a stab wound to her chest, and the man who did it has never spent a single day in prison for any of it. This is that story. To understand what happened in 2000, you have to understand what Kauai was before it happened. Specifically the west side, not the resorts, not the north shore that ends up in every travel magazine. The west side. Places like Waimea and Kekaha and Hanapepe. Dry, quiet, working-class towns. People who have been here for generations. Farmers, families, neighbors who know each other by name, and almost no crime. In the years leading up to 2000, Kauai had gone nearly 3 full years without a single homicide. Not one murder in 3 years on an island of 60,000 people. Think about what that means. Think about how rare that is anywhere in America, let alone in a place where most people do not even lock their doors at night. That was Kauai. That was the west side. And that is exactly why what happened next was so devastating. Because the people living there had no reason to see it coming. And the police department investigating it had no detectives trained to handle murder. Not one. In 3 years of no homicides, nobody had built that capacity. Nobody had prepared for this. They were about to need it badly. April 7th, 2000. A body is found in a ditch near Polyhale State Park at the far western tip of the island. End of the road. Miles from anything. The kind of place you only end up if you are going there on purpose. The woman's name is Lisa Bissell, 38 years old, from Hanapepe. A local woman who had lived her whole life in this community. She had been raped. She had been beaten. She had been stabbed multiple times. Her throat had been cut. The medical examiner puts her time of death at least 12 hours before her body was found, which means she was there through the night, alone in a ditch at the edge of the island, while the Pacific rolled in 100 yards away and nobody knew. But what told investigators immediately that this was something beyond a single act of violence was where her belongings were found. Not near the body, not near Polyhale, miles away, off a road in Waimea on the other side of the west coast. She was not killed where she was found. She was taken from Waimea, driven to that remote dead-end park, murdered there and left in a ditch. Somebody chose that location. Somebody knew the road ended there. Somebody understood exactly how isolated it was and used that isolation as a weapon. This was planned. 6 weeks later, May 22nd, 2000, Kekaha, midday. A 52-year-old woman is working in her yard, broad daylight, her own property, doing nothing more dangerous than tending her garden on a Tuesday afternoon. A man walks up to her. He is calm, completely calm. No urgency, no visible threat. He looks at her and he speaks, and what he says is so ordinary and so disarming that she does not flinch. She does not step back. She simply listens. My name is John, and I am homeless. She tells him about a neighbor's property down the road where homeless people are sometimes allowed to camp. She is being kind. She is being a neighbor. She turns back to her work. He is behind her before she can react. He drags her around to the back of the house and he beats her with a force that breaks one of her arms clean. Then he sexually assaults her. Then he takes out a knife and stabs her in the chest. The knife hits her breastbone and bends. He throws it in a bush and runs. She is left on the ground behind her own house. One arm was broken, a stab wound to her chest. Alone. And the telephone, her only way to reach the outside world, is just a few yards away. It takes her 3 hours to crawl to it. 3 hours. She calls for help. She survives. And she is able to give investigators something critical, a description of the man, his face, his build, the sound of his voice, the words he used, The police also collect his DNA from the scene. They have a composite sketch. They have a description. They have his genetic profile. What they do not have is the man. August 30th, 2000. A decomposing body is found at a remote campsite near Pakala Point Beach on the west coast. Her name is Daren Singer, 43 years old. Originally from Maui. She had been raped, stabbed in the throat, beaten so severely that her face was almost beyond recognition. Like Lisa Bissell, she had been dead for at least 12 hours before anyone found her. In September of that year, more than 500 people attended a memorial service for Daren Singer. 500 people who knew her or knew someone who knew her. 500 people from a community that was now afraid in a way it had never been afraid before. 3 attacks, all on the west side. All involving middle-aged white women of similar height and weight. All of them alone when it happened. A knife used every time. Rape every time. Same man. Same area, same method, same hunting ground. A reporter at the Honolulu Star-Bulletin wrote that the whole island had been thinking for months. Kauai may have a serial killer. Investigators questioned all 70 registered sex offenders on the island. They worked on the composite sketch. They worked the DNA. The surviving victim was flown to Honolulu and shown a police lineup. She could eliminate 2 men. She could not identify the killer with certainty. But there was one name that kept surfacing, one name that investigators kept coming back to. Waldorf Roy Wilson, a Hawaiian sex offender with a history that made him an immediate person of interest. In 1983, Wilson had been convicted of rape and kidnapping on Oahu. He served his sentence. He was paroled on January 9, 1999. And when he got out, he moved to Kauai. He arrived on the island 11 months before Lisa Bissell's body was found in that ditch near Polihal. On September 12, 2000, Wilson was arrested for violating the terms of his parole. A local television news station broadcast that he had been brought in for questioning in connection with the murders. Wilson sued the Kauai County Police Department and Honolulu Magazine for defamation. The lawsuit was dismissed in 2009. His DNA was tested against the DNA recovered from the crime scenes. The result was inconclusive. He was never charged. Inconclusive. That word has haunted this case for 25 years. Not cleared, not eliminated, inconclusive. Which means the question was never answered. The man investigators believed was responsible for 2 murders and a near-fatal sexual assault was tested against physical evidence left at the scene, and the result was inconclusive. And then the case went cold. In November of 2007, America's Most Wanted featured the case in an episode called Trouble in Paradise. Tips came in. Nothing led to an arrest. In 2012, Kauai police publicly stated the investigation was ongoing and that they remained hopeful cold cases would be resolved. The DNA is still in an evidence locker somewhere on that island right now. In 2018, investigators in California arrested the Golden State Killer, Joseph James D'Angelo, a man who had committed more than 50 violent crimes across California in the 1970s and 1980s. A man who had been free for over 40 years. A man who by the time they came for him was 72 years old and living in a suburb of Sacramento like any other retired grandfather. They caught him using genealogy. They took his DNA from a crime scene. They ran it against public ancestry databases. They built a family tree. They worked backward through the branches until they had a name. 40 years. Solved. The DNA from the Kauai murders has been sitting in evidence since the year 2000. The technology that cracked a 40-year-old case exists right now. It is not experimental. It is not theoretical. It has